we'll listen to the Zoom lady tell us that we're recording. Thanks, Zoom lady. All right, welcome everybody. Dan, super excited to have you here. It's good to kind of finally meet you after years of internet kind of not stalking exactly, but you know, I'm sure you get that a lot. Yeah, this is the Collab Lab. So a bunch of people, we have mentors and developers here from the Collab Lab who you know, are all our developers are early career people trying to break into the industry and stuff. So we're all super excited to kind of watch you go through a little bit of an interview panel here. We have 4 interviewers. I'll let them introduce themselves. Yeah, they're gonna have you go through some live coding, ask you some questions and things.
Awesome.
If people, I think everybody probably knows who you are. I mean, you're a little bit of a, well, I don't know if it's not internet celebrity isn't quite right. You're not like Paris Hilton or something. But yeah, like
a niche celebrity.
Yeah, right. But you work at, do people at Facebook now call it Meta or Facebook?
Yeah, yeah, it's not Meta. So
okay.
Work at Meta.
Yeah, they made us at Zapier call our teams squads, and so we're still adjusting. But anyway, and the maintainer of Redux as well. So
well, I'm not anymore. I'm a co-creator, but I don't like actively maintain it. So it's it's a bunch of different people now.
Okay, right. Yeah, that makes sense. But I'll turn it over to our interviewers. I'm gonna pin the people who are kind of actively involved with this, or actually maybe Chris, you need to do that.
Oh yeah, because I'm the host now. Oh,
yeah.
I never pinned anyone. Time to learn on the fly.
That's all right. You just
I see it. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, click on their face and
started with Mike.
And then you can add pin and pin the 5 people involved.
Myself. Let's get Juliana in here. Let's get Dan in here. And where's Steve? There's Steve. Let's get him. Okay, there we are.
Cool.
Cool.
Right on.
Shall we take it away, Andrew?
Yep, go for it.
Alrighty, sweet. Cool. Well, thanks so much for joining us today, Dan. We all really appreciate it at TCL. We'll do a quick round of intros here, and then we'll get into some of our questions. So my name is Chris Dopich. I'm located in Portland, Oregon, and I work with Andrew and a bunch of the other people here at Zapier. Let's do a popcorn style to keep it going. I'll popcorn over to Juliana.
Hey everyone, I'm Juliana. Nice to meet you, Dan.
Nice to meet you.
I am a software engineer at Buffer. I'll pop it over to Mike.
Hey, thanks, Juliana. Hey, Dan, and hey, everyone. I am Mike Lambert, software engineer at Zapier and also a mentor here at the Collab Lab. And last but definitely not least, let's go over to Steve.
Hey, Dan, I'm Steve Gardner. I'm an engineer at Zapier also, and a mentor at Collab Lab. Really excited for this.
Hi.
Awesome. Thanks so much, crew. All right, let's real quickly sketch out how this interview is going to go. So we're going to split it into 2 sections. The first one is going to be more of a technical coding challenge. And then the second half is going to be a combination of like some technical questions and some kind of behavioral questions about your previous experiences and things like that. So I'll go ahead and kick us off here with the coding question, and I'm going to send you a link to a code pen, Dan. I'm going to message it to you directly here in Zoom. Okay, did that come through? Excellent. All right, if you could share your screen for us and pop open that link, and then we'll talk about the prompt.
Okay, 1 second. Let me figure out. Share screen. Okay, so I just need to. I think I might have to restart because it's the first time I use this computer. I got a new computer, so it doesn't have the permissions. Let me try. Yeah, so I'll just restart the call in a second.
Cool. Okay. This is very much like being hired at a new company. The first thing you always have to do is get your permissions correct. So,
Chris, you could probably pause the recording if you want, so there's not a gap while we wait for Dan to come back.
Sure, pausing now.
Okay, I'm back.
Cool. Resume the recording, and I need to repin you as well. Let me get that going here. Okay, cool.
All right.
Alrighty.
I think that worked.
Yeah, we can see your internet browser. Beautiful.
Okay,
cool. So I'll talk you through the challenge here real quickly. So this is, I think, a fairly common React coding challenge that I think some of our students here might be likely to run into out in the real world. I know I've had to solve something kind of similar. So we've got an application here, and its job is basically to keep track of a count. This could be any kind of count that you might see on the internet, like maybe likes or subscriptions, something like that. And we've got a few components in our app. We've got a form component that contains a couple of button components, which are our incrementer and decrementer components. My challenge for you, Dan, is to hook all of these components up together so that when you click the increment button, it increments the state counter. And when you click decrement, it decrements the state counter.
Okay. Do you care about the specific component structure? Like, for example, can I move this piece of state? Oh, I see. Okay, so you have, so like you care that the form component is, I don't like get rid of it and just inline this here, right? So like you want to have the form component. Is that?
Yeah, I'd like you to keep the component structure if possible, but also feel free to talk through like how you might restructure it, you know, if you were dealing with this problem in the real world too, because that's also interesting. Okay,
I'll just start by like, I'll just like make it first implementation and then I'll figure it out. Yeah, so I think like the state lives here, so we kind of want to drill it down. So what I'm gonna do is, we don't actually need the state, we only need like these things to have handlers, right? So we're gonna have like an on-click prop, and this is gonna have an on-click prop. And so here, I guess we're gonna have like we don't actually need to know the current count. We only need to have a thing that will like on increment, on decrement. I wouldn't necessarily like use the specific component structure like in practice, but maybe we can just start with that. So when we click this, we want to increment. When we click this, we want to decrement. And then we want to actually implement these. So on increment, we want to do set count +1. On decrement, we want to do set count -1. And I think that I would expect this to work. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, that looks great. So one consideration that I've got for you here, I noticed that you're sort of following down the props hierarchy, handing down these handlers. How would you tackle this situation if instead of being nested in like a single form component, you had a much more deeply nested structure, like, you know, maybe a dozen components in the way? You know, how would you deal with that situation?
Yeah, so I would say there's like kind of two ways I would maybe think about this. Like, I think the first thing I would try is kind of tweak the component hierarchy, and it really depends on like where that nesting happens and like how exactly it happens. So like in some situations, what could happen is actually like maybe these extra layers, they would kind of leave somewhere here. So maybe like one, if you have an example where you do have like this component renders that component, and then that component renders another component, and so on. Like one thing you can sometimes do is pass children to it. So for like in that example, like maybe I would restructure it so that maybe form actually accepts some children, and I could pass these things like inside of that form, and then like this would be like children. I'm not like fully specifying it, of course. Like I'd need to actually fix these up, but essentially, like in some cases, it's possible. Like if you have like the fancy border, or I don't know, like a tree of those things here, like they could all go here, but this thing doesn't actually care about this because the logic, it's still it is still very close. Like I don't need to kind of spread it apart. But the other solution is like if that is not feasible for some reason, if like if these pieces are really disconnected from each other so far that like it's not meaningful to pass these buttons from, you know, through many layers from outside, I really want to kind of decouple them, then I would probably use context. So do you want me to implement the context solution, or should I like describe it?
I would love to see you implement it. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah. So basically, so this is code pen, right? It doesn't have inputs.
Yeah.
Okay. So I take create context, use context from React. So this is necessarily going to look a little bit convoluted for this example, but well, the thing that I want to put on context is really, it's not the state itself, right? Like it's really the ability to kind of to set it. So maybe I would also use reducer here. Again, not super necessary, but we would need to decide like what do we want to put in context? Is it like a bunch of methods like increment, decrement? Maybe that's okay actually for a start. So I'll start with that, and then we can see if a reducer is helpful. So I'm going to call this set count context. So create context. I'll say the default value is null. Like ideally we would make it throw if it gets used, but yeah, and we would want to make this a provider for this thing, and the thing itself is and ideally this would be memoized, but I'm not gonna do it for now. So I would actually just pass. I think in this case, I'll start with just passing set count, and then we can discuss why it might be a bad idea. So I would just pass set count, and here I do set count equals use context, set count context, and I do the same here. And I would do so because I don't actually have getting a bit, because I don't have access to the count, I'm going to use the updater function so that I don't have to pass it in, because I can just do that anyway. Yeah, I think that I would, well, and I don't need this, and I don't need, wait, I don't need this either. Yeah, I think I would expect this. No, it doesn't work. Oh, ouch. Set count is not a function. Sure. Oh, okay, because I passed it as an object, right? So yeah, I was initially planning to pass two things. But the nice thing is that I don't need to memorize it because it's going to be stable. So yeah, so this works. The parts that I'm like not, it depends on how realistic the example is, right? Like in practice, we probably don't want to pass the state setter through context to like anything that wants to use it, because then it's very hard to tell like what are the different parts of code that could trigger it, and like they don't have any limitations on what they could do, right? So I could solve that by like passing specifically like increment and decrement as functions, so that we limit what components below can do our state. Or I could another pattern that is pretty common is to pass a dispatch function down, and then the dispatch function kind of has like a switch that says like if you pass like an action that says like increment, then do this, otherwise do this. And use reducer is kind of a built-in way to do exactly that.
Nice. Yeah, I like where you're going with that thought process. And I think that maybe leads me into one of my follow-up questions here for you. So don't worry about implementing this one. I really just kind of want to talk through this with you. But how would you take this app and evolve it so that it could support an undo functionality, where if I like increment, decrement, I can hit the undo button 3 times and it's going to end up back at the correct state where it was previously.
So how large do you want the, does it remember like all updates, or like do you want to keep history forever, or do you have like, do you kind of window it to like last 10 actions? Like how do you want it to work?
I think you can assume some fixed buffer of number of actions that you could step back through. I think that's usually a reasonable assumption, although I would be curious to know how you would do an infinite number of action undos.
Yeah, well, I guess like one thing you could do is just snapshot the, like every time you change the state, you also like you have a separate state that is like like a history array, and you kind of push the, like as you're about to change it, you push the previous value into that, like you update the history array to have that thing. And so when you press undo, we, like there's a question like, do we show all the undo stack, or do you just want the button to work? But essentially we just we set the count to what was in the history at that time, and we also make sure that we don't accidentally push to the history because of it. So like we would need to so for example, if you say like, if you do undo like 5 times and then you increment the gain, we need to make sure that we've discarded the part of the history that is to the right, or like after this step we're currently on, because I don't know if I'm making sense. I think what I'm trying to say is that like usually in apps with undo stack, if you do a bunch of undos and then you do a different action, you need to make sure that the things between the part to which you undid and the, you know, the state you were in like initially, they get discarded. Like you don't want to keep that in history.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. And do you see any ways that that sort of keeping track of, you know, the actions that have been executed on the app, are there any kind of intersections with the dispatch pattern that you were discussing previously?
Yeah, yeah, like depends on like how inefficient you want to get. Like conceptually, one way to think of it that is really inefficient, but it is kind of a nice way of thinking about it, is you could like alternatively, instead of keeping track of the current state, you could keep track of only of the actions that happened, right? So like conceptually, instead of having the current count that is kind of materialized, you could instead have only history, and you could have like a pointer to where you are in the history, so kind of the current index, which would normally be always incremented, but when you press undo, you would like go up the stack. And the way you calculate the current value is just by like replaying all these actions through like something like a reducer function. And so you could always calculate the current count from scratch using the initial value, which is 0, and then the history array, or like that part of it that you're currently like materializing. But this is really inefficient, right? Because like you would have to iterate on every time you want to render something. So that's not actually a good idea, but it is conceptually, like I think it is a nice way of thinking about like actions. And that, I don't know if that is the connection you wanted to make. Like the reason I see the connection is because this kind of action log is something you naturally get from like writing your function as a reducer, and then describing each thing as an action, as an object. And so you like when you call dispatch, you kind of push to that action queue. But I think also I think it is a very naive approach to undo and redo. I don't think it's actually a good approach, because in practice, if you kind of implement a complex, like if you try to implement something like a graphics editor, like Excalibur, for example, and you want to implement undo redo, it's not good enough to snapshot like the state every time it changes, but because actually, like, for example, if you're adjusting some parameter with the slider, you don't want to snapshot every intermediate value, even though in the UI you do actually want to reflect it as it happens. So there's some kind of grouping that is necessary for undo to actually make sense. And so it needs to be intentionally designed. It's not just a matter of snapshotting the state at every point.
Right. Yeah. So kind of keeping like almost a debounce of when you're sort of sampling those changes. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think you had a previous question too, which is sort of like, was that the right connection? You know, I was looking forward to dispatch, but no, you totally nailed it. That's one of the things I love about that pattern is that it captures the actions that are occurring to your app over time. So yeah, that's awesome. Okay, I've got just one last question here for you before I hand it over to my other interviewers who are going to talk through some other technical and behavioral questions. But I'm curious, how would you re-architect this application if it needed to work in an online fashion where other users could also increment and decrement the counter?
That's interesting. I don't know. So I think there should be something centralized. Like there should be, I think, like there should be something that is like the source of truth, because like I don't think it can be kind of peer-to-peer in the sense that there needs to be something that decides what is the canonical state of the counter, and you don't want to like, none of the clients can really know that because it takes a while for the response to come back. So none of the clients can really like set it. They can only, because otherwise you'd have race conditions where like a client thinks the counter is 200, the client says 201, but actually it's been incremented by somebody else in the meantime, and that gets lost. So you can't do that. So I think what the clients need, like there should be a server or like something that keeps track of the current count. Each client needs to send the actions. So the client needs to send, I want to decrement, or like I want to increment. And then the server decides what is the server receives the requests and decides what is the canonical state. The server makes sure that we can't go below zero. Well, I guess in this example, we actually can go below zero, it's allowed. So, but if we were not allowed to do that, then it would be up to the server to make sure that this doesn't happen. And then the server, in like as a response to the request, the server sends the current canonical count to the client, but also the clients need to be notified when somebody else changes the count. So I guess like they would either have to kind of poll the server periodically. So maybe like once a second, ask the server like, has the count changed? Has the count changed? Or there needs to be some kind of persistent connection, like maybe like a WebSocket connection, where the server kind of, every time the count changes, the server pushes the update to the clients. Yeah, I think, and initially, of course, when you load it, it needs to give you the current count.
Yeah, I think that's a great talk through on that. And yeah, I definitely see where there could be some contention between clients, almost sort of edging into a consensus algorithm area. I'm mostly just happy that you didn't decide to like try to build a blockchain to solve this problem. So,
okay,
okay, cool. So that was the technical coding challenge part of the interview. Thanks so much. I had a lot of fun. And now I'm going to hand it over to my other interviewers to go through some other questions. I think to keep things simple and not to confuse too much, why don't we just go in the order that we introduced ourselves again? So Juliana, do you want to kick us off?
I was gonna say, does anyone remember that? Do we remember 20 minutes ago? No, I'm kidding. Thanks, Dan, for that walkthrough. I think you can stop sharing your screen. We're not gonna be using this anymore.
okay.
So I will kick off. We're doing one question and then rounding, right? Interviewers?
Yeah.
Cool. My question is, could you walk us through a technical trade-off that you worked through recently?
That's interesting. Recently, I've been writing a lot of documentation, so I'm actually a bit rusty on coding. Can I give me like a minute to think, just to kind of reflect?
Yeah, for sure. No, and no pressure. It doesn't. We're not gonna know if it was recently or not. You can pick your most interesting one.
Well, I think maybe that, I guess like that does relate to documentation. Like we want to have interactive examples in the documentation. So we want to have like code blocks that have previews with them, and that you can edit the code, see the result in real time, and so on. And there is a bit of a trade-off there, which is there's a bunch of code we need to load, and there's a bunch of like there are questions like, okay, where do you do syntax highlighting? Like, if you, for example, if you do kind of classical documentation with just like code blocks in the middle of the text, it makes sense to do the syntax highlighting like at the build time, so that it is already kind of pre-compiled, and when the user loads the HTML before it is hydrated with JavaScript, the user can already see the highlighting. But then the thing with that is that it doesn't work if the user can edit the code, right? Because we somehow need to like re-highlight it according to what the user has edited. And so in that case, we would have to ship the code for highlighting to the client. And then there's this weird case where if you start editing before it has hydrated, like what do we do? Because we haven't actually loaded that code. And it's kind of like, maybe it's possible to have a nice solution to this. For now, what we're doing is we don't actually highlight the code on the server at all. We just keep it plain, and then all the highlighting and all the kind of rich interactions are they happen on the client after hydration. I'm not super happy with how it works right now, and we're also loading way too much code. So like in terms of interactivity, like that is like we kind of went like full interactivity to the side of the trade-off, but then the loading time kind of suffers, and some of the like if your internet is slow, there is a bunch of like network waterfalls we need to solve and so on. So we need to kind of like work backwards and actually like improve the user experience there for people with like slower connections and stuff. I don't know how much of a trade-off it is, as it's just like we really cared about the functionality, but we do need to kind of fix up the flaws that we introduced because of that.
Nice. Thanks for answering. Mike, do you want to go next?
Sure. Yeah. So Dan, I'm wondering if you could walk me through your code review process. When somebody says, "Hey, Dan, can I get a review on this PR?" Walk me through your process. What do you look for?
Yeah. I think the first thing I look for is just like understanding what the hell it is supposed to do. So it's helps to have a description that gives enough of a high level idea of like what the code. Well, I want to understand like what the code was doing before, what the code is supposed to be doing now, and like why this approach is a good idea, like why that is the path we take there. And if I don't understand it, like I think like first I kind of look at tests. So I see like, okay, what tests did you add? Not in terms of like verifying the change, but more like if you're like, presumably there is some effect of what your code is doing. So I want to know what that intended effect is. So I kind of retest this documentation. I do want to preface that I work in a library. I don't work on application code. So like in application code, a lot of tests are really bad. Like sometimes it's better not to write tests than to write the kind of tests that people sometimes write. So I'm not saying that like for application code, like if I was reviewing like something that changes some UI, I would load that UI, right? Like I would actually like click on it, see like, and we actually expect like, we expect if you change the UI, you'll have a video attached of what the hell you were like before and after, because I want to be able to revisit it like 5 years later when I'm trying to change something. I want to know what you were trying to do with this line of code that I'm trying to remove or something. but yeah, I look through the tests. I kind of get a sense of like, do I understand like what the change is meant to do or not? I look through the code. I scan for maybe like for common mistakes in general. Like, do I see like, does this add a race condition? Does this add like a potentially null check, or something that is like null access, or something that is just looks kind of fishy from the coding standpoint. But I also look out for like, does it seem weird compared to the rest of, like, does it seem like this edition is really doesn't vibe? This is so like, does it vibe with the rest of the code, or does it feel like it's like added without consideration for how the the code is already structured? Like, does it feel like it's written by the same team, or does it feel like it's something else? And if it feels like it's something else, like usually it's just a bunch of different conventions, maybe different styles of writing. So I try to look out for that, and not in the sense that I'll be like, oh, you have to do it this way, but it helps to like have some consistency. And the other thing I look out for, again, I work in the library on library code, so for us, like, testing is important. So I try to make sure, like, I check out the code locally, and I basically like comment out some of the changes and see like, does anything fail? And if nothing fails, I'm like, well, I don't know, like, how can I prove that this actually did something useful? So I'm looking for things that are uncovered, or that if I flip the condition, like nothing happens. Yeah, and then if I feel like if I understand what the behavior is supposed to be, like I kind of feel like I have a spec for what it should be, and also like I have the tests that verify that it actually works, and I've looked through the code. It makes, I don't see any correctness issues. I don't see any performance issues. I don't see like code editing hotspots that were supposed to be fast and so on. And it just seems like it makes sense. Then it's probably fine. And then if it's not fine, we have the tests so that we can rewrite the code, but at least we have the behavior spec.
Awesome, cool. Yeah, really, really great. Steve, your witness.
Yeah, Dan, I just had kind of an open-ended question, but how would you go about debugging performance problems in an app, specifically like maybe the initial load?
Well, I would want to understand what it's doing. I guess that is kind of the most important thing, right? So there are different tools to help with this. Like Chrome Performance Timeline is pretty good. Assuming that we're talking about the client part being slow, not the server part being slow, because if the server does a bunch of things before, like I would need to look at when does the request actually arrive, like when do we get the first bytes, and so on. But if the server part is fine, but then the client part is kind of slow, like I would just need to see like a kind of a bird's eye view of what is happening. Like could be we're running a bunch of JavaScript on the main thread that is kind of blocking it. Could be that there's some kind of like the slow network calls. Could be that there are like waterfalls that are like solvable, that we don't start loading something until something else is loaded, but we could have like parallelized it. So maybe looking for those parallelization opportunities. But yeah, I think mostly like profiling and high level architecture, because like sometimes the architecture is obviously not good, and then it's not unexpected that it would be slow if the architecture is kind of slow.
Okay, yeah, you had mentioned like parallelizing some long-running tasks. What if you find we are loading way too much JavaScript?
Yeah, well, it depends on like if we need to load it or not. I think that is an important question. Like, do we need? Because there are cases where, like, if you're implementing like a Photoshop in on the web, like you probably need to load it. Like it's just unavoidable, right? and there's nothing you can even show before it's loaded because there's just nothing useful you can, that is the premise of the app, right? But then like if you're making like a content website, like I don't know, like a music reviews site or something, like then it probably doesn't make sense to block on. So there would be a question of can we show something before the JavaScript loads? Do we have to load all of that JavaScript at once? Are we loading JavaScript that is not being used? Like, can we like code split it? Can we just like move some of this to the server so that we don't even process something on the client? So yeah, I think like broadly speaking, I would look at why are we loading this JavaScript? Is it being actually used? And at which point does it become critical, right? Like, is it critical before we can show anything because there's just nothing to show without it? Or is it kind of like an enhancement thing that can be added, on top? Or is it just completely accidental and shouldn't be loaded in the first place? Or could it be loaded like later when a specific kind of functionality is used? So it depends on what. Sometimes like maybe we're using some library that is really large, but there is an equivalent that is much smaller. So it depends on what exactly we're doing.
Yeah, that's great. It depends.
It depends.
Cool. That's it from me.
Sweet. Well, we've got, I think, 4 minutes left. So if anyone's super excited to ask Dan one more question, I'd say jump in and do it, and then we'll end at the top of the hour.
Hi, Dan. Thank you so much for doing this. I posted this question a little earlier, but I was just wondering what your thoughts are on context versus Redux and when you would use one over the other.
Yeah, I do get asked this a lot. Like, and every time I answer, like people like make a thing out of it. I don't think about it. Like, it's not something I think about at all. If I were like creating a new project, it's difficult for me to think of a reason to like add the Redux to it. Not because like I think like I don't know, it's bad or anything, but because they're like, why would I do it? Like like there should be some reason to add it, right? And like for me, just the kind of projects like kind of like I spin up some hobby projects sometimes, like they're pretty small, but in general, I would think that if it depends on like what do you want to put in it, like why add it, right? And if it's something like server data, like something you fetch from the server, you want to keep it somewhere, then I don't think it makes sense to put either in context or in Redux. Like usually there are libraries that are more specific for specifically like server cache. There are like useQuery or Apollo or Relay, or there's a bunch of them, but essentially they handle that kind of logic because it's not really stateful. It's more like a snapshot of something that lives somewhere else. So I wouldn't use either for that, I think. And then for cases like UI state, like I think like use state and put it, if it's really, if it like a lot of it is local, like for a lot of it doesn't make sense. Like if you have two of the same component on the page, like do you want like edits in one of them to immediately, like if you have like two posts rendered side by side and you type in a comment in one of them, you probably don't want that comment to be typed in the other one. Like that would look silly. So like that, when you kind of do that kind of mental test for like, is this piece of state local or not? Like I think in a lot of cases it ends up being local. So I would just like use local state, determine where it should live in the hierarchy. And then in the cases where and then the things that like when I save the post, yes, they should be updated, but that's because they're snapshots of the server state. So again, that is kind of the server cache thing. And then the remaining cases, like maybe you do have some kind of state that is global-ish, like a theme switcher or something like this. But then it's also kind of UI-ish. Like I think of it, yeah, it's just the state of the entire application. And like it does make sense for me to use context at the top. And then there may be cases where, sure, maybe you have some kind of re-rendering because of that context and it's kind of slowish and you can't easily like memoize specific pieces to kind of optimize it. And then you're looking for escape hatches. and you're just looking for a thing like, how can I update a bunch of components without, you know, without causing like a big re-render. And that is kind of incidental, right? It's not like it's not that, like, if that weren't the like if there were no performance problem, you wouldn't reach for another tool in this case. But like sometimes you do because it just doesn't work well enough, and so in that case you might opt for like Redux or handwritten event emitter or some other library. But yeah, that's maybe like a case where I would add something, but not because like, oh, it's Redux, I need to add it. More like, well, I guess I ran out of options. I don't know what to do next. I might as well just put this thing and see if it helps me here.
Awesome. Thank you for clarifying. Appreciate it.
Cool. Well, we've reached the top of the hour. So yeah, I just want to say thanks so much for joining up with us today, Dan, to do this mock interview. I think it was a lot of fun. What we're going to do now is we're going to do a debriefing between the interviewers and also give our collabbies here in the audience a chance to ask us some questions. You're welcome to stay on the call if you want to be here for that. You also totally have the option of dropping, just whatever you want to do according to your schedule.
Yeah, I have some time.
Okay, awesome. So yeah, let's get into the debriefing. What do you think, y'all? Are we going to hire Dan?
Yes, probably. No, I just wanted to, one thing that I really wanted to highlight from Dan's responses is I like that he was like very honest when he didn't know or when he needed time to think. Like, I find interviews can be really stressful, but like it almost like throws a little bit of a wild card to your interviewer. Like, oh, this person's not stressed out by me. This person, you know, I like it when those things happen. It feels like it evens out the playing field between like interviewee, interviewer. And I also left a comment too. I really liked when Chris asked Dan like harder and harder implementation questions. I like that Dan didn't get bogged down on like teeny tiny implementation details of like, oh, and then I'd have to check this and that. Like, no, he just gave like a very high level walkthrough. But at the same time, sort of highlighting like, oh, this part here might be a risk. This part here might be a blocker. I think that helps interviewers see that you are not just thinking about the code, but also thinking a little bit about the product and what's going to happen after you write your code. What did y'all think?
Yeah, great thoughts, Juliana. I can jump in with a few too. So something that I really appreciated with the way that Dan approached the problem that I gave him was, I think, you know, he definitely reached for a simple and robust solution initially. I think that, you know, if I was given the same question, I might be tempted to immediately jump into using something like context or some other kind of global state, because my brain would kind of be like, I think this is what the interviewer is looking for. But I really like that he started with a simple solution, because that's a really good reflex to have as an engineer. If we can fix something with a simple solution, that's probably better than fixing it with a more complex solution, assuming that they both solve the problem, right? So that was something that I like to see. And then, of course, you know, very much was able to scale with the questions that I followed up with and make it more complicated as we go. So that was great. I think one piece of feedback that I would maybe give is I would have liked to see a little bit more questioning about what the parameters of the exercise are up front. Like, one of the things we ran into, for example, was running into a negative value on the counter. That was something that I might have anticipated that someone might ask up front, like, is it acceptable to go negative on the counter, you know, and sort of clarify some of these functionality and sort of user experience questions up front. We ended up getting there anyways, because we discovered that happened as the application goes on. But generally, I think, yeah, advice that I would give people, especially our audience here, is like, you want to be really crisp about getting clarification on the parameters of the question up front and making sure that you sort of fully understand, you know, everything that's being expected. So, but yeah, that being said, I think, you know, Dan did ask those kinds of questions too. But yeah, I think a little bit more of that even would have been amazing. So.
And From what I saw, I guess I'll focus on the question that I asked about the PR reviews. I really liked how Dan started off by trying to clarify the requirements, right, before jumping into looking at code or jumping in and looking at what are stylistic issues, which that ended up being a later thought. But really getting clarification on that. I love the looking at the tests and using those as documentation. Just one area of feedback that I would give would be the I guess psychological things that go into code reviews, and are you giving positive? Do you give pointing out things that you really like, or just looking at the negatives? But I mean, overall, that it seemed like it was really clear what the review process was like, and also how you kind of structure your thinking and when you look at what types of things.
Yeah, and I think for me, I really appreciated the breadth of Dan's answers and the ability to kind of take a really high level view over what the possible options are and reasons we might go down a particular path, but never like getting down into the weeds of it and kind of getting lost down any of those trains of thought, just keeping it high level and really thinking about finding the best solution to the problem at hand. So I think we should send Dan an offer as soon as possible.
Cool. Well, thanks for sharing your feedback, my interview buddies here. So I know that Andrew also wanted to open this up for a Q&A for our collabbies and see if they have any questions, either for us as the interviewers or possibly for Dan, around what that process was like, or if there's any advice that you're looking for when it comes to these kind of technical interviews or anything like that. So yeah, if you got questions, shout them out.
So I have a question. When I saw on Twitter that you want to do some public interviews, my main question was why? What was your motivation behind this?
Yeah, I don't know. It just sounded kind of funny. I think it is interesting because I don't really interview like much. I had like basically like 3 jobs, and like I got one when I was like 18, and I did have like a small interview, and then like I got another one. There wasn't really a formal interview, but there was like a take-home exercise, and then there was like the Facebook interview. So I don't really have experience of like applying to many different jobs and like seeing many different interview processes. So I think in part I'm curious how people structure, because I did a lot of interviews as an interviewer, but I don't really know how other companies do this. So in part it's like kind of seeing the world kind of thing. In part is because I don't actually care, right? Like I can, like I don't, if I do badly, I'm like, well, it's entertaining either way, right? Like if I do well, it's entertaining because it's interesting to see how I do that. If I do badly, it's also entertaining because, well, look at Dan failing to like center a div. So I think it is just funny, and I can put myself in this position because I don't care like if people think I'm like incapable, because, well, I I don't kind of need to prove myself. So I think it's kind of cool, and I think it is also interesting because like I don't have like a computer science background, which a lot of people like tend to assume that I do for some reason, or like I don't. So I think it's interesting to see, like maybe people would find it kind of relatable on some level. But also I think I do have some experience. Like I'm not, I'm not underselling myself, and so I do kind of want to see how that plays out, I guess. But mostly I'm on vacation, I'm bored, I wanted to do something fun, and I also wanted to do some video content, so it seems like it's a fun opportunity.
Hey, thank you.
I'd love to just, I guess, a little bit of feedback in general, but also, I guess, more specifically to you, Dan. It's been really fun to see you go through the process because I've seen some of your previous interviews as well, and just the ability that you've had to kind of talk through your thought process as well as reason through the problems that have been presented to you. I think for those of us who are earlier in our careers, and maybe like myself, I've only gone through a couple of interviews prior to landing my first role. And so seeing somebody go through it and watching you kind of reason about all of the situations is it's really helpful. And thank you for, I know you did it for fun and whatever, but it also, I think it really is a great contribution and a lot of useful experience for people to take in. So
Thanks.
Sounds like Mandy also had a question there in the chat.
Yeah, and maybe this hasn't come up for Dan, so I'll just put this out to everyone. What do you do if you really stumped on a question during an interview? Do you follow up with an answer later? I mean, what do you do in that moment?
I can try to answer this for myself. Again, don't have much interviewing experience as an interviewee, so I don't know what's like a good thing to do. I think I kind of panic a little bit and my mind turns off. One thing I try to do is kind of talk through the problem myself and maybe talk through like possible ways to go, or maybe write some code to help myself, or like write something down. But in general, I honestly think that like if a person gets stuck, it's the interviewer's responsibility to help them. And I will give you like an example. So when I had my Facebook interview, so Jin Chen was interviewing me, and she's like, she came up with, she's like one of co-authors of Flux architecture, and like she's like the big deal. And I was really like, I didn't have any time to prepare. It was like on the spot interview. I didn't plan it. It kind of came together like the day before. So I was a little bit nervous, and there were like the question itself was not difficult, but there was like a moment where I needed to swap two elements in an array, just like swap them in places. And I was like, I know it's 3 lines of code. I know how they kind of look, but just can't do it. I'm just and I said, like, can you like not look for me, not look at me for a second, because I'm just getting lost. And she said, hey, like, I know you can swap 2 items in an array. And she just started like scrolling or something, like she was just like looking at her phone. And I drew a table. I was like, okay, my mind is being stupid right now, so I'm gonna help my mind. So I drew a table on paper with like 3 things in it, and like I spent like 2 minutes doing it, but like I said, okay, I need to take this thing from here. Like I wrote it down step by step, and then I turned it into code. And yeah, of course, I've seen this 3 lines of code like 100 times before, but I just needed that little bit of like, yeah, you got this, it's fine. Like I trust you. And I think it's like the interviewer needs to try to do that. And in cases like when we do interviews, like at Meta now, like we also try to make sure if the person gets stuck, like you need to kind of give them, like to help them prod along a little bit, to give them like a hint, or kind of to help their thinking, because when they're stuck, you're not extracting any useful information out of the interview except that they happened to get stuck. You don't know like why they got stuck and so on. So it's important to keep the thing going and see, kind of keep gathering information about how they translate their ideas to code and so on. But unfortunately, a lot of interviews are bad and don't do this, and that's kind of sad.
Thank you.
I don't know if any of the interviewers probably also have comments on this, because again, I don't have experience doing interviews, so I don't know what are some helpful tips.
Well, one thing that I saw you do, Dan, was you said, wait, hang on, can I have a second? And like took some time to think. And I think that it's much better to have that gap where you're thinking about a good response than to start talking and then like really you don't know, I don't know what's at the other end of the sentence. So taking that time to like calm down and think is really valuable, I think.
Bridging off of what Mike said there about staying calm, I think that as human beings, we have these bodies that have evolved in a certain way to react to stressful scenarios. And usually that is not very optimal for coding. When your fight or flight response kicks in, your heart is beating, your brain actually starts to shut down and it starts to reallocate those resources to like the parts of your brain that would be necessary to fight or run away, which is not going to help you in an interview. So, just taking a moment to like deeply breathe and try to recenter yourself and bring your mind back into a productive space, I think is really useful in technical interviews. It's also just useful like on the job. I'll notice that if I'm getting really tense and getting really activated about a particular problem that I'm trying to solve, just putting on some relaxing music, breathing deeply, and trying to bring myself back to a productive space can help me to then find the solution that wasn't coming to me before in my really panicky mental state. So
yeah, one thing that helps me when I don't know the answer is like, I haven't had a lot of interviews that are trivia questions, but if it's like a trivia question, what I've done is like sort of try and think if I know something that's related to it, like, I don't really know too much about that, but I have done some work in that. I wonder if this is like related, blah, blah, blah. And then if it's like coding questions, similar strategy, like just try to like not talk about what you don't know, but acknowledge it. I have nothing wrong with saying like, I haven't worked with that before, but I have worked with this, or I have done this other thing. I wonder if the challenges are the same. I wonder if it's, because that's sort of what you would do in a job, actually. If you don't know how to make something, you have to figure it out, ask questions, try to model that behavior.
Yeah, but that like as an interviewer, I also kind of like if the person says, I don't know how this works, but here's like another thing, or like I can try to fill in the thing, and that is like it's not a red flag. Like it depends on like what the kind of the qualifications for the role are. Like sometimes, yeah, like if you don't know this, like it's gonna be a problem. But usually people do have gaps, and sometimes these gaps are pretty wide, like in places you just don't expect, and that can be okay. Whereas the thing that does become like a red flag is like when the person is very confident in something that is like completely wrong or completely misleading, and then I'm like, well, like you could have not said this, but like now that you've said it, I can't ignore it because, well, like if you were taking this same assumption and like doing this in our code base, like we would have problems. So it's better not to say something that you're that is like you're kind of making it up. Then I think it's better to admit I don't know this, but I know this other thing.
awesome. Cool. Well, I think we're a little bit over 15 past the hour here. We started maybe about 15 minutes late, so I think we're basically at a good wrap up point here. Besides, I'm starving and I've got to go get some lunch. So, but thanks so much, Dan, for meeting with us today. This was a super awesome opportunity. I had fun. Hopefully the other interviewers did too. And I hope you enjoy the rest of your vacation.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's been fun.
Awesome.
Thank
Bye,
you.
y'all.
See ya.